Hey everyone, and welcome back to Awen Lutherie. This is part 3 of my Great Guitar Build-Off entry. This week we got some really good detail work done. I have a headstock plate, I have a truss rod cover, the headstock has been thicknessed, and the heel has been dimensioned perfectly, ready for gluing in. I was hoping to get a bit more done on the body this week, but hey, you can't do it all. So grab yourself a cup of tea, get comfy, and enjoy the video. Really quick, once again, just before this video starts, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's been watching so far and who's been leaving comments and subscribing, liking, all of that good stuff. And if you're not already subscribed, please consider it. It really does mean a huge amount to me. And if you've missed the other videos preceding this one, go back and check them out. They're kind of cool. So enough of that, onto the video. Okay, picking up where we left off in the last video, I want to continue working on the neck, specifically for the moment, the neck heel, to get that ready for gluing in. So let's bring you in close so you can see what's going on. First of all, I need to make the bottom of the heel parallel to the top of the fretboard. And I've decided I want below the fretboard 42 millimeters. And then our pocket itself is going to be 40 millimeters deep. To do that, I've actually made up this block, which is exactly 42 millimeters and perfectly parallel. So I'm lining up this top edge with the bottom of the fretboard, and then I'm simply drawing my line. And I'm using a 0.3 millimeter pencil to do this, so it's really just accurate. For the back of the heel, I'm actually pop it into the vise. And now I've got to line the whole way around. Let's see if I can. So I've now got a line the whole way around. I know if I plane to that line, I'll have a perfect neck joint, or neck heel. Put it in nice and tight. Alright, that turned out pretty well. I took the calipers here and I measured each of the 4 corners of the neck heel, and it came out at about 1/4 of a millimeter of a tolerance all around. So yeah, that's about as accurate as I think we can expect, and I'm very happy with that. Next, I want to move on to the other end of the neck, up at the headstock. So currently we're looking at 5 different pieces, which I don't particularly like the look of. So we're going to take an offcut of the horse chestnut top, butterfly this down the middle, open it up, and then we'll have a lovely book matched top that matches our body. And it's got, on this side, I hope you can see this, it's got some interesting grain because there is a knot up here, so the grain is kind of going here. So we should get kind of a cathedral pattern, which will actually match the grain of the body really well. So I'm just going to mark this down the middle. I have my marking gauge right here set up already for the correct thickness. And there we go, one book matched piece. So really cool checking going through, which is what I expected, what I wanted, but more than anything, I show you that kind of pyramid shape, and that will match. You can see it here, the same shape, well, a similar shape. You see it more down here as well. On the body, it's kind of interesting because it kind of goes in a, I don't know what shape that is, but that's pretty cool. So we'll get that glued up. And I also have a backup piece here, which might look better. Ooh, it depends what I want to go for. I'm going to glue up both pieces anyway, and once I have them planed down to correct thickness and everything, then we'll decide which one I want to go for. This one is nicer because there's more rays going up, but there's a lot more checks. Like that's completely broken. But that can be glued back. So we'll have a look. I'm going to stabilize this one really quickly, and then I'm going to joint this one. To joint these two pieces, I'm going to use a shooting board in fact, with my number 6 plane. So these things are pretty handy the way they work. It's essentially 2 boards, and the wood is sitting on one, whereas the plain side is running along the other. This is perfectly 90 degrees. So what it does is it gives me a perfect 90 degrees here. And by holding it just over the edge like this, the plane will naturally make it conform to a lovely straight piece. So that now, see, if I use the plane as a kind of a straight edge, is perfect. And it should be 90 degrees as well. So theoretically, if I do this for both of these, it should give me a perfect gluing surface on each board. Now, hopefully you can see that, but that is a perfect join. Okay, put this guy away. It's a really handy jig, and one I just don't use often enough. It does require that your plane be absolutely perfectly razor sharp though. And I take these shavings, and I actually have shopping bags full of little plane shavings. And I have a good idea of something I want to do with it, but you'll have to stay tuned to find out what that is. So these are going to be quite awkward to glue together. What I'm going to do is place one side into the vise, apply glue, rub back and forth. And what that does is now that's nearly stuck just by itself. And then get your masking tape, and this is kind of a weird one. If you put the masking tape over the corner like that, hold this nice and tight and pull the masking tape over. And it's important to hook it over the edges like that. Flip it, because that is applying pressure trying to open the joint. But by flipping it over, doing the same thing on this side, really pull it, and that should provide enough tension to keep these together. Like, now this works predominantly with joints that are already as close to perfect as you can get. And you can see we've got a bit of extra glue squeeze out here. And if I push them together, there's no more extra squeeze out coming out, which means it's about as tight as it needs to be. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for this other one. Great, now I will set these aside, both of them. And the more I look at this one, I think that's the one we're going to go with. But for now, set them aside and come back to them tomorrow when the glue has dried fully. Okay, so it is the next day. These have well and truly cured. Let's just get the tape off this one to see what it's like. This one came out absolutely perfectly. And this is our backup, or our secondary one. And it looks like this glue joint also came out perfectly. So to get these to the correct thickness, I'm going to attach them again to that sled kind of setup for the thickness planer and put them through until they're close to the thickness I need for the headstock plate. Okay, so we're fresh off the thickness planer, and as you can see, we've had some casualties in the process, but this is perfectly fine. I hope you can see on the pieces I've drawn in red the outline of the headstock, so I know what I actually need, and there's still plenty of material. And I have decided to go with this piece over this original one because the extra cracks and everything in it just give them a lot more definition to the cathedral pattern. Plus as well, it has this really cool butterfly knot effect here at the top. So I just think that'll look really, really cool on the headstock. There's nothing wrong with this one, it's more plain. And you know, I'll use it for another build, it'll suit another build, but for this particular one, I just want to use the more interesting piece. That's it, pure and simple. So it's still a little bit thick off the thickness planer, and I'm going to just use hand planes and sandpaper to bring it down. Let's get a good look at this one actually. It's a really, really cool wood. But while we're at it, let's get a close-up of the body itself here. Because Dan from Canada has been asking, and I promised I would get a nice close-up of the wood. So it's definitely open-grained. I would say similar to oak. And if you want the end grain, hopefully that is good enough. There are some bits like that, super glue staining, and a lot of these darker streaks are actually, there's a small micro crack there, and where this was stored was next to a grain silo with ammonia, which reacted with the tannins. I got a lot of oak from the same person, and the oak was practically black. So, interesting. Anyway, on to planing. We're down pretty close to the correct thickness now. So I did actually have to cheat a little bit. The planes just weren't going to do this for me at all. I thought they would, but they wouldn't. So I used a combination of my leveling beam for a little while, and that was taking a long time. So I actually went and I got the belt sander and just worked away on it for a little while, and I now have a full bag of dust, which is pretty handy. And then to finish that off, I did go back to the leveling beam. Now I've had to draw a center line here. Hopefully you can see it, I'm not sure, because that join line is invisible. I actually can't find it. What I had to do is take out the shooting board again, plane this, so that's like a mirror finish off the plane at the moment, and I can just about see the join. So now that I have my center line, back to this template, and I have a little bit of tear out right there. So I'm going to bring this up right to the edge of that tear because I don't want the tear out itself. Line this up at my center. We had good results with the green pen last time. Yeah, brilliant. Now, pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to pop over to the bandsaw really quick and just very rough. I'm going to leave quite a lot of slack around the end of this. Right, that came out really well. So next thing, I want to get this bottom face kind of correct onto the headstock. To do that, I have the nut I'm actually going to be using here. I decided to try out one of these scalloped nuts. They're the same size, but they have, let's see, hopefully you can see that, in between every string slot, the meat has been just scooped out. So it should be pretty cool. And that's that's always nice. That is spot on perfect for this. Couldn't have gotten that any better if I planned it. So what I want is to have this to butt up perfectly against it. And to do that, we're pulling back out the shooting board. And I'm just going to reel kind of easy enough. I'm actually just going to reduce the cut an absolute hair. And that's right up to the line. Check that. This guy in place. Now obviously there's a little gap here because that's angled and the nut slot, or the back of the nut, is not. So I am going to lift it up very, very slightly on the shooting board to get the proper angle. So I want a little bit more off that side just to make it even. And the way this is working is this is just keeping it at 90 degrees here. And actually this very corner is preventing this from shooting off the end, as it were. And I can rotate the piece along that pivot point, this pivot point in here, to just tune up. So when I rotate it back here, the gap opens up on the back there and it changes the angle. So I rotate it just the tiniest amount. And that's pretty spot on. So I just want to, that's going to be way too much. Let's try with this. And that's put a bit of an angle. I don't think it's going to be enough of an angle. It's not, but it's only very barely off. If I move that there, no, if I move it back to here. And we'll try that. And this obviously is a little bit of trial and error. Something else. And that in place, and that goes there. See, I push this against it, so it's now holding up. And then when I go to check the center point back here, if they're lining up, that means this angle here is still 90 degrees to the center line, which is what I want. And that is spot on there. So let's, now this is in, this is exactly where I want this headstock, the top veneer, I don't know what you call this. So I'm just going to pop these guys in, and I'm just going to drill in some locating holes, pretty much the same as what we did for the fretboard. Words are eluding me. Perfect. These are 4 locating pins. The next thing I need to do, and this is kind of something new that I want to try, is I want to, in this headstock plate, cut an area for the truss rod cover. And that means then the truss rod cover itself will just sit in, it'll almost be inlaid. And I'm going to leave it just very slightly proud, and I think it'll look really, really classy. So for this cutout, I have a template here. And I want this perfectly lined up because that's the little things. So with that lined up now, and that is the slot we need to take out for one of those truss rods to fit in. Can you see that in the video? Just about. When I tilt it, you can. For this portion, we need our... I've completely forgotten what these are called. They're a jeweler's something. And our jeweler's saw right here. And then very, very carefully, just working to the inside of the line here. One down. All right, new blade, let's go again. Okay, third time's the charm. Cool. And then throw it on the ground for good luck. So we're now pretty close. And there we have it. Let's get this guy glued on. And if anyone ever asks you, how many clamps do you need? Just show them this mess. Anyway, let's put that aside because we need to make a truss rod cover. And we're gonna get a little bit experimental with this one. This is some bark off a lovely slab of walnut I have hidden in the corner because it's too lovely to use at the moment. But I'll go over and get this nice and close. I notice, look how lovely that kind of scale effect is on the side. And this is hard. When I really press in, I can make a dent, but it's, you know, for what we're looking for, it's going to be pretty good. So I'm going to try and bring this to the bandsaw, and if I can slice it at that angle and try and get a couple of slices of this nice interesting pattern, and then I can get that and again book match it, because we love book matching things in the guitar world. And I think that will make a very, very attractive truss rod cover. Just a little small detail, but that's it. And I mean, I've said it before, I hate waste, and people might look at this and say, oh, it's only a bit of bark, chuck it. But that's beautiful. Why should I chuck it if it's beautiful? So let's pop over to the bandsaw and see if we can get this. Cool, so we now have a bunch of bits, essentially. Okay, so this is what we saw originally, that cool scale, and that was our first cut. So unfortunately that kind of scale effect goes away, and you see we have this bit which is very loose, and that's what actually caused our event on the bandsaw. I don't want to call it an accident because I didn't get hurt, thankfully. Scared the bejesus out of me, but that's about it. I wonder if I got that piece, and actually that's way too small, it's no good. So I'm predominantly looking at these ones, and I was kind of thinking if I jointed it up to that edge, which is about there, of course I could just try and glue that and have that right there in the middle, because that looks really, really cool. And I have a feeling if I just plain... Now I could get a nice straight side on this piece, plane it there, cut it in half, flip it, and stick it together. And that might not be the worst idea. Okay, enough thinking about it. I'm going to take these all over to the bandsaw. No, not to the bandsaw. I'm going to take them all over to the belt sander, sand them to the correct thickness, and then I'm going to reassess the situation. Now, you probably can't see when I'm trying this, but it's just up at the very tip here, and a little bit too tight still. Bring the taper in. Now while I'm very, very nearly there, this doesn't stand out enough. So do you know what we do with things that don't stand out enough? We bind them. So once I'm done fitting this, I'm gonna go get some maple binding and yeah, make it even fancier. Essentially, I'm just gonna use super glue because that'll be nice and quick. Put it onto the side, getting all of it. And then just glued it down. In hindsight, it probably would have been nicer to do the sides second, simply because it'll tie it in a bit nicer, but hey, hindsight's always 20/20. Alright, so we have the faceplate has been on, it has been trimmed down to the size of the headstock, or the shape of the headstock. truss rod cover is complete. So now I need to take down the thickness of the headstock in total. And to do that, I'm just going to mark it at 15 millimeters because that's what I need for the tuners I'm using. Mark it there. Actually double check, make sure you have it marked correctly. Yep. And using my finger as a depth stop, and then double check. Cool. We'll pop over to the belt sander now and just take this down real carefully. And I'll actually use the end of the belt sander, which is about, I'm going to say a 2, maybe 2.5 inch barrel drum. That will give me my ramp into my volute as well. So 2 birds with 1 stone with that. Alright guys, I am going to call it there for this video. So we did get a good bit of work done this week. It kind of doesn't look it, but we did. I mean, the heel is squared up, ready to be glued in, essentially. The headstock is ready for an inlay and then finish. So we have our head plate on. The whole headstock has been thicknessed. We have our truss rod cover ready to go. We know our nut fits beautifully. In next week's episode, we're going to be putting the neck to the side and getting back to the body itself. And hopefully by the end of the week, when next week's episode comes out, we will have what can definitely be described as a guitar in the works. I'll have all of my cavities routed for at least. I'll probably have the electronics done, and we might start into a carve. Not quite sure if we'll have the time to get there just yet. But thanks so much everyone for watching this episode. Make sure to hit like, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification to get notified anytime I release any more new content. Thanks very much everyone, and I will see you next week.